Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here. My name is Hedley Twidle, and it's my pleasure to be on stage with Bongani Kona, Alexandra Dodd, and Antjie Krog. Please welcome them with me. In one sense, the sort of rationale or occasion for the panel is because they are all included in this anthology, which I edited with Sean Christie, the interpreters, South Africa's new nonfiction. So, you can get 4 for the price of 1 in the book signing. Afterwards, no, I was told to remind you about there will be book signing afterwards. But we will touch on the pieces that are included there, but we will range and rove through their careers as writers more generally. I'm really delighted to be here with them. They are writers and people that I hugely admire. Giorgio Armani just passed away, R.I.P. And I heard that he said that style is not about making an impression, but style is about being remembered. And I think of each of them as stylists, actually. They are attentive to how writing lands, takes shape, is formed in the mouth or on the page. They take risks, they play with language, they experiment, they're restless, they're unsettled. The title of the panel is Unsettled Accounts, and I put unsettled and restless into a thesaurus, not an online, a real old-fashioned thesaurus. And I thought I'd just read the synonyms because I think it gives the sort of atmosphere or the lexical feel that we're going to be dealing with. I think they're unsettled not only in terms of, they're unsettled in terms of genre and voice and approach. And synonyms for that are restive, uneasy, protean, mixed up, deurmekaar, I guess we could say, disorderly, unpredictable, disquieted, unreconciled, perturbed, ruffled, rattled, flustered, unnerved, roiled, edgy, on edge, fidgety, nervous, skittish, excitable, highly strung, worked up, agitated, fretful, jumpy, jittery, antsy, itchy, hyper.
Guilty as charged.
So,
Guilty as charged.
So, of course, on the far right, we have Antjie Krog, who's, of course, a renowned poet and a renovator of Afrikaans, or Antjiekaans, as I think it was once called, but has been many other things, including a reporter, both in radio and in print, and, of course, the author of a loose trilogy of prose nonfiction that includes a famous Country of Mascal about the TRC, A Change of Tongue, and Begging to be Black. She's also a professor at the University of the Western Cape, a scholar, translator, and I really want to stress this, the general editor of a series from Oxford University Press called Africa Pulse, which is bringing African language classics into English, among them Thomas Mafolo's Chaka and S.E.K. Nkai's Itiala Lamawele, or The Lawsuit of the Twins. I think it's a fantastic project. The piece that we anthologized in this book was co-written with Kopano Ratele and Nosisi Mpolweni, and it was from a book called There Was This Goat, investigating the Truth Commission testimony of Notrose Nobomvu Konile, the mother of one of the Guguletu 7 killed by the police in 1986. And that's about simultaneous interpretation during the TRC process, and it was such a fascinating thing to consider, how interpreters in real time, just a few seconds behind what was being spoken, had to move across the speech of perpetrators, victims, grieving families, commissioners, lawyers in this highly complex multilingual environment. So it also gave us the metaphor of this anthology, moving and translating culturally, literally, metaphorically, between different languages, experiences, ethnicities, different worlds of a very complicated country. Alexandra Dodd has had a fascinating very free-thinking career, which began in journalism at Rhodes University during the states of emergency in the 1980s. She mentions that in her piece in the anthology called Spear and Loathing, which was about Brett Bailey's painting The Spear and the Zuma presidency's response. You remember that? It's funny because in one sense it seems like many news cycles ago, but you know, I've talked before with you, Alex, about Ezra Pound's definition of literature was news that stays news. And why does something stay news when their immediate relevance or topicality has subsided? And I think yours is a great example of something that's about far more than it seems to be about. Alex worked for the Mail and Guardian in its glory days in the 90s, when it was the host of such incredible long-form journalism. She was also the arts editor. She's been a scriptwriter. She's worked in film, in public arts, festival commissioning and programming. She's a scholar as well. I met her when she was doing her PhD on returns to the Victorian aesthetic or ethical era in contemporary South African art by artists like Mary Sibandi and others. She's written a lot about visual art, and her work there includes the book Johannes Pokela, Only the Sun Knows How I Feel, and also David Goldblatt, The Last Interview, which I'm definitely going to ask her about. And then next to me here is Bongani Kona, who's a versatile and I would say beloved presence in the Southern African literary system, who's a writer, a journalist, a maker of podcasts, audio documentaries, has been a contributing and commissioning editor at Chimurenga, the amazing Pan-African, very unsettled, Pan-African Gazette magazine, anthology, radio station, events hub. Just an amazing project. And actually provided more pieces than any other publication for this anthology. So I think that Chimurenga's work as a forum for prose nonfiction should be recognized. He's also, I forgot, of course, to mention that Antjie's most recent book, which we'll talk about, is Blood's Inner Rhyme. And Bongani's most recent book is the anthology Our Ghosts Were Once People. That's where I first came across his piece, The Descendants, about family history and memory and trauma in Zimbabwe and the Second Chimurenga, or the war against Rhodesia, that he writes about so powerfully. It was first appeared in that anthology, and we re-anthologized it. Thanks for letting us do that, Bongani. And his works also appeared in the New York Times, BBC Radio, and the anthology Safe House, published by Cassava Republic, whose presiding spirit is also at the festival this year, and is an amazing press. Welcome to you all, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Hedley.
So I want to open by asking them each to read a bit from a work of their own choice, and ask a question or two, and then maybe a follow-up, and then definitely want to open the floor in good time for you all. So please think of some questions. So Antjie, I wanted to start with Blood's Inner Rhyme. I was at the launch with you, and sure, I really, I think Armani's right. It's about what you remember at the end of the day, what lasts, and your book has really stayed with me. So I would invite you to read a passage from it to kick us off.
It's a letter from my mother. Maybe it's not memorable, but it's at least funny. It's Arbor while she was in old age flat. Wish you were here yesterday, dear child. A far-off niece of your father's visited, Aunt Susan. Such a poor, scouring sponge of a being. She had a pair of earrings stretching her lobes into elderly labia, with a velvet bandeau, mind you, to help carry the load. And of course, not a leaf falls in the Eastern Free State that she isn't aware of. Her chief theme, survival in the new South Africa, and boy, does she like to sneak in a boast. We Afrikaners, she assured me, had our souls forged in the Boer War. on commando. Not concentration camp, no, my sister, commando. A small group that swerved and stormed, sidestepped and shot with only one driving principle, survival. Just look at our youngest son, Dewald. When the government said land must be dispossessed, he sold his farm and opened a guest house in town. When the government said black people must open guest houses, he sold his and started a wedding venue. And when the government said adverts needed to be made for blacks as the majority customers, he went into Afrikaans films. Dewald is a rich man today, she assured me. And then she waggled that little foot of hers in its golden bracelet sandal. Why do old women paint their toenails? Her feet look like two keyboards that have stood too long in the rain. The one toe aimed left, the next burst totally rightwards, the third crawled up in its own arse, and the nailless little toe had a blotch of Q-Tex on the skin. And the more she rasped on, the more immobile the morose face of her husband, Evert, became. A poor old water bull, docile next to the abysmal inner life of his wife.
Thanks so much, Antjie. Yeah, so I mean, it's sort of like like when you don't know what to feel when you read a book. Because, I mean, it is about your mother's last years, when she's living out the last years of a very eminent life as a writer in the Free State and being cared for by a woman called Victoria Motlong. But, it's a sort of end-of-life writing and grappling with all of that, but it's very, very funny. And I wondered, like, was that comment, did you always set out to write a funny book, or did it just sort of happen?
You asked me a question that I didn't answer properly at the launch, and that is, why is there so much shit in the book? And I want to give you...
So much shit in this book,
I want to give you a very solid answer tonight. It said somewhere that, I mean, shit is like all the things that is at the edges of the body that we despise, from the ears, from the nose, wherever. Old women more than others, but there you are. And because you despise it, you ignore it, and that it's not good to ignore the things at the fringes of life. But there's a further theory that they call it fecality. Fecality, in Afrikaans, I devised this word, drolskap. So that fecality, if you only think of it as a joy or as funny, you are missing the important thing of fecality. What it does, it makes you, it enables you to absorb the unabsorbable, namely mortality. So.
Wow, yeah, sure.
This
Drolskap. I'm reminded your mother's complains at one point that someone called Tini, who's Tini again, in the book? She
was her cousin.
Her cousin. In her whole oeuvre, because your mother, she only remembered one passage about the maggots eating the shit in the long drop.
Yeah.
And do you know what page that's on? Because I'd love you to read that too.
I will. You can continue, I'll find it.
Okay. Okay. Well, I'll come back to you then. So, Alex, let me turn to you. You and Antjie actually share something. I was trying to look at bridging, connective tissue between the panelists. You've both written about David Goldblatt. Antjie, you wrote an introduction to a reissue of Some Afrikaners, which is also a very, very funny piece in some ways. Alex, you produced this remarkable book called The Last Interview. And I just wanted to ask you, because I mean, I guess we're talking in some senses about documentary forms, and Goldblatt is one of the unignorable documentarian of 20th century South African lives. Can you just talk about what led to that interview, what drew you to his work? I also want to ask, because the reason why I'm very intrigued by that book and why I really like it is because you also butt heads in interview. It's sort of, you have differences. Yes. And, him being who he was, he doesn't back down, and you being who you are, you don't back down either. So I wonder if you could just take us into that project.
Sure. Well, I first met David in about 1998. I was working at the Mail and Guardian at that time, and I was given the assignment of going to interview him on the occasion of him becoming the first South African to have a solo exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. So it was an exceptionally daunting assignment, I won't lie. And I went to his home, him and Lily's home, which is just off of the sort of helter-skelter of Louis Botha in Joburg. And I remember sitting in the very green garden of their house, eating lunch with him. It was a very welcoming space, and he made me feel instantly welcomed. But I remember the precision with which he ate his lunch. And there was something that something really got to me in that, this real deliberateness about the way he was cutting his tomatoes, and determination and clarity about the way methodical, exactly. And it also reflected in his body. He was very hewn. He didn't have any excess on him. He was like down to the bone sort of thing, down very, very clear in himself and what he was doing on the planet. And that had a very big impact on me. And I think one of the things that I remember talking about at that time was about nostalgia and how he had absolutely no truck with it. And that to me at the time, I must say, I was quite a helter-skelter person, partying quite hard in Joburg and the art scene in Joburg, really big into the jazz, really just trying to, very transgressive in my own ways, but perhaps quite muddled and all over the show as a result of it. I was so interested in breaking the boundaries and crossing all, getting out of all the silos and everything, but that made me quite a riotous force in my own right. And his discipline and his intolerance for nostalgia were the things that impacted me. And his assertion that the past had no interest for him other than its mobilization in the present. I think that, and that's really stuck with me. So anyways, I wrote that piece, and years later I had the unbelievable experience of traveling in his camper van down the Swartberg Pass into Die Hell. Oh my God. And it was a wild, hairpin bend road, and I was in the back of the van, and I had actually been to the opening of his show at Stevenson when it was still in De Waterkant the night before, and it had been a big night, I won't lie, and so I was just being, thrashed about in the back of this camper van, and and he had no apology. I think he kind of knew where I was at, and he was like, take it, because you're here for the ride, so, we're going into the hell. And so that was another experience, and it was a very ghostly and strange experience, actually inhabiting the very residences of that utopian community that had, by that stage, completely dispersed and disappeared, but that were living for all time in his photographs. And I remember sleeping on the floor of one of those, very, very earth daub residences and feeling a very strong feeling of ghosts. But to fast forward, and I will wrap this faster, is my last interview. It wasn't called the last interview. I just happened to be there in Joburg and went to go and speak with David. It was actually on the occasion of him publishing a catalogue to accompany a major exhibition in Australia. And it by no means, even though he was terribly ill, and, he had a catheter, up him, and it was heavy. But I think my father was dying at the same time. And so I had the same feeling. I just was in denial about him dying, and I think he was too. We spoke about his future projects. We were very zealous. We had lots to talk about, and lots of, the combat was almost a way of staying alive. That sort of interlocution, that feistiness in our conversation, that disagreement was a way of saying, yes, you're in the game. And then he wasn't. And so that was just absolutely appalling and a terrible, shocking grief. And so when it came to making that book, returning to the transcripts was a very, very ghostly experience in its own right. That sonic presence of his voice in my head. And, so sorry, that's a lot of information.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Alex. So what excerpt are you going to read?
I think maybe we should go to someone else. I feel like I've been speaking a lot.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah,
it's okay. We'd love to hear you read.
No, yeah.
I'll come back maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Bongani, I also wanted to say a huge thank you to you for your role in this book, because, you were just so generous with your suggestions and your connections and have you read this and have you considered this? We did try to conscript Bongani as a co-editor, but I think he had other things to do. But I just, you were so, you were such a key part of this anthology. I'm just thinking, for example, of Madeleine Fullard's piece in here, which you drew my attention to in your anthology. Madeleine Fullard, working for the National Prosecuting Authority and the Missing Persons Task Team, trying to locate the remains of people who had disappeared and murdered under apartheid. And it appeared first in Our Ghosts Are Once People, and it's just an extraordinary piece. And, I just want to thank you for, I think you might have had to draw it out of her, because if you think about the ethics of some of those pieces, how families want to remember the past and what the sort of forensic process of exhumation reveals, they don't often align, and it becomes very, very, very complicated. So, yeah, just a thanks to you. And I think you're going to read from the beginning of your piece, The Descendants.
Yeah. Also, thank you, Hedley, by the way. And I don't mind the keeping quiet, by the way. Thanks, everyone. I work in academia, so I always tell my students, if you get invited somewhere with smart people like this, just maybe keep quiet from time to time, ask for the salts, and then ask for a paper so that people don't forget you, because it's a good strategy, so thanks. I'm reading from the beginning of the essay that's titled The Descendants, and it has an epigraph from a poem by Habiba Badaroun, which goes, "Our forgetting is also our home, and why we never left the old country." And the poem is titled Promised Land. An old black and white portrait of him hung in our living room. His slanted signature marked the books on our shelves. And once a month, Cousin T and I walked my grandmother, Agnes, to the post office to collect his pension, until the checks stopped coming in the late 90s. By then, all the money had been stolen by officials. She'd also get a monthly sum from the War Victims' Compensation Fund. Like her husband, whom she never mentioned, Agnes had been a school teacher. She'd take us to the library on our way home from the post office. The books we read depicted suburban, white childhoods, full of ease. We lived on a quiet street in a residential neighborhood called Hatfield, in the south of Harare. It had been laid out as a whites-only suburb in 1920. 6 decades later, as the era of settler colonialism drew to a close, droves of white families sold their houses on the cheap and left the country. My grandmother, with the help of her children, purchased one of those properties on the eve of Zimbabwe's independence in 1980, moving there from Farm 61, a home she shared with her husband in Msengezi, an erstwhile native purchase area. She never returned to Farm 61, though it was hardly an hour's drive away. Or rather, she only went there to commit the dead to our family graveyard. In my lifetime, I saw her bury her 2 remaining sons, a daughter who died in a psychiatric facility, and a nephew who'd hanged himself on the farm in 2008. The police took 4 hours to arrive and cut Cousin P down. His father stood by him that whole time, in the rain, among the pines and gum trees. But that, as the saying goes, is a story for a different time. I'll stop there.
Thank you. So Bongani, this piece goes on to evoke, the war against Rhodesia, the Sikunche Maringa, and how your grandfather was abducted and disappeared during that conflict, probably for falling sort of afoul of the ZANU, faction of the liberation movement. It's a difficult subject. It's in all kinds of ways. And I have to say that one of the things that I found remarkable about this piece is that it's so short. It's so succinct. As a sort of overwriter and a maximalist myself, I look with sort of bemusement and kind of envy at how you take such a massive subject, which is clearly one of the 2 or 3, what did Camus say, the 2 or 3 great images in whose presence one's heart once opened, and one's art is a slow trek to rediscover those. It's clearly something that's so core to your family and to your being and your history. And yet you managed to write about it in just a few pages. I wondered if you could say something about that succinctness or that brevity, given the enormity of the subject.
Thank you. So I'll do my best to answer the question, and thanks for the kind words. I think one of the things I should say about the piece, that there were 2 things that really kind of inspired it, because this was a story I actually didn't know, because my grandmother was so silent about it. But I encountered a friend we have in common. I shared a poem by the Irish poet Michael Longley, who was a poet of the Troubles, and is famous for a poem called Ceasefire. Do you know this, Antjie?
Yeah.
And do you know how the poem ends? So the poem ends, it's taken from the Iliad, and the poem ends with the King Priam, who has come to beg for his son Hector's body from Achilles, and they have a meal together. And the last lines of the poem are King Priam saying, "I get down on my knees and do what must be done, kiss Achilles' hand, the killer of my son." And I could not get that image out of my head. I couldn't get it. And because in a way, and then what happened with COVID is my mom is a dialysis patient, has been a long-term dialysis patient. And we remember how afraid everyone was during those early days of COVID, because it was quite an uncertain time. And then she had a scare. And because she's somebody who's also quite guarded, so I started talking to her about it. And then she's had these 2 letters from her father that she's kept in her wardrobe, to this day in her wardrobe, the last 2 letters. So the one letter was about earlier that year in 1979, to say things are a little scary. And then the last letter says, in the event of death, it says terrible this way, do not come home. And so I had all of this material, but I didn't have enough research about the war itself. So I was just trying to draw from my own life. That's why I suppose I wasn't labored with a lot of research. I didn't go into, what am I trying to say? I just had what I had at the time. So the project then leads to my PhD. This is what has become my PhD. And I know a lot more, but sometimes when you know a lot more, sometimes it can be difficult to write. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, that was, you know, when you read those letters and you say there are other housekeeping instructions, but even now I'm struck by the severity of that phrase. My dearest daughter, terrible this way. It's very affecting. And again, it's the sort of succinctness of it. I don't know if this is a fair question because, you know, epigraphs, which, you know, are quotes at the beginning of a piece, I think they should be kind of indecipherable or sphinx-like. But I'm really struck by those lines by Khabib Badarun. Our forgetting is also our home and why we never left the old country. Are you willing to say anything about that?
Yeah, I think, and then we'll move back to you.
Don't worry, I've got this, don't worry.
No, okay. I think so the poem, I don't know if you know also the poem Promised Land, what it's about. So the poem Promised Land, and I thought it comes from Khabiba Badarun's collection, The History of Intimacy, which is a most recent collection. And it's about, and I think this is so difficult to write, it's about the passing of Moses Molelekwa, but also the passing of Moses Molelekwa's wife, the circumstances under which that happened. And she's saying that, because you've written about Moses' work as well. Moses dies in 2000, is it at the turn of the millennium? And she says there's a silence that grows around the circumstances of the passing of his wife. There's just a silence about that. And so she says she moves to the US around about that time, and she carries Moses Molelekwa's music to say, this is the place that I'm from. But writing now, she realizes that there were silences that she kept at that time. And then in the poem, the speaker asked Moses, why is it that we never talk about Florence? And this is such a revered figure. And I thought that was such a brave thing to do, and to tell stories which, in a way, don't sit comfortably with people, don't sit comfortably with myths we have about people, about countries. So for me, for instance, then to have grown up in a country where the liberation struggle, and I think Antjie also touches about this in a most recent book, where the liberation struggle is always about the heroic black masses, the white oppressors. But the story is much, much more complicated than that. And what people did to each other in rural areas. And there's no way you can bring this story up like openly. It has no public space that it can live. So that was why I thought Khabiba gave me courage to say, actually, it's important to tell these stories. Yeah. And it takes, it's really important. Otherwise, we never go anywhere if we don't tell them.
Absolutely. That helps me understand. I really do see your piece as working with, you know, something I've tried to think about as an unusable past. But what I mean by that is a past that can't be sort of made to just perform a simple, single political gesture. But for that reason is all the more important in understanding how people live through the politics of this part of the world. You know. Yeah, a friend of mine also calls it an inappropriate past. You know. Anyway.
Can I just say one final thing, and then I'll shush?
Of course.
So in the moment when I was sitting with my mom, and I'll be honest about this, like I think also I keep pointing to Antjie to say, because she's not somebody I understood, my own mother. Like I don't think I understood her in that sense. And then in the processes, she's showing me the letters. She tells the story that he's been abducted. And so she just goes to the bus stop. There's one main bus stop. This is wartime. She goes to the bus stop on them. One day she leaves work. She just waits for the buses just to see if somebody will disembark. She goes there the first day, the second day. She goes there the third day. And I'm like, the person who goes to the bus stop and the person who never goes back again to the bus stop, something happens to that person. And I was like, now I understand. Now I understand. Because there are photos of her as a trainee nurse. And you can tell like there's a kind of innocence that somehow I think gets lost in that process. I guess it's difficult to live through wartime without losing that.
Thanks so much, Bongani. Antjie, getting back to drolskap. Have you found the passage about the maggots?
Yes, it's toch. Somebody had once visited the outhouse in the night and accidentally dropped the electric torch down the hole. The next morning, it was still lustily burning down there. Of course, Tinti and I looked with great interest into the hole and came face to face for the first time with the monsters that keep themselves in long drops. Used to trifling things like mite larvae in currants or skin-thin little organisms in boarding school porridge, we were horrified to the core of our very beings at the giant maggots, pale, thick man fingers, rising like dough in silent masses from below. We dragged each other half-conscious into fresh air. Still, I think the young people of today would have much less self-aggrandization and more respect for the judgments of the hereafter if they could see some serious old-fashioned maggots munching on one's excreta.
So Antjie, in the course of this book, which is about many things, but one of the things is about the relationship with your mother, who's a writer, unusual situation. Mother, daughter, both writers of serious, with a serious body of work, and you quote her generously throughout the book, and it's always a pleasure when you do. I was trying to think why this work has stayed with me, and one of the reasons it has is because the complexity of writing about a parent, at one point, in one sense, she's the formidable, extraordinarily intelligent woman and writer who's penning things like that, but whose politics are so different to yours. On the other hand, she's in another temporality of the book. She's an elderly woman. She's in advanced old age, and she's kind of frail and losing her bearings, and she's being written about by people like Victoria Mokloang and other carers in the home, where they're writing about her bowel movements and her mood and the sort of absurdity of the care home situation. So it's a complicated thing, isn't it? Because are you sort of engaging a parent who's in their prime, or are you engaging the sort of person who can no longer even be a kind of worthy interlocutor or opponent? Do you know what I mean? And it's sort of that complexity that your work takes us into.
I think it ought to be more than just my mother or my relationship with her. It is also her as a sort of stump left over of a kind of Afrikaner that hopefully you don't get anymore. Or maybe they were the better kind. I'm not, but it must be more than, and also where all of that is coming from. And then, in a sense, how you want to cut yourself loose from that, and have another inner than hers. But you are fighting against this rhyme that you have grown up with. And I mean, there's many things that you are thankful for that sort of harsh upbringing and insistence that you stay a humble person and that it's okay to be an ordinary person. It's okay. Don't think yourself a genius. Don't think you're doing something special. You just write, others cook, others drink, but, it's ordinary. And I'm thankful for her, for all of that. I think maybe it's the aftakeling of that kind of old age, but it's also my own fear of that kind of life, the utter loneliness of it, and helplessness, and that you have in you such a lot of things, but you cannot feel anymore. You cannot be excited. You listen, to a song and it doesn't move you anymore.
At one point she says, she gets the staff of the care home dress her up and put her in front of the TV, and she says, I've never cared about my appearance, and here I am like someone who got left behind by the church shuttle.
On a Monday morning.
On a Monday morning. I mean, it's sort of, you just get these mixed emotions, or if I was being more Lani, I'd say the affective register of this book is so complex because it's concerned with the last things and the ultimate things, but it's also screamingly funny throughout. I was just going to go back to a moment from Country of My Skull that I often think about, which is when you were covering the TRC as a radio journalist. And I remember at your launch, you said that actually, your English wasn't great at that time, and like the kind of people who like to correct people's English were, correcting your English.
While they were still listening to SAFM.
Yeah. And there's this wonderful passage where your radio producer or sound engineer says to you, your voice tightens up when you approach the word truth, the technical assistant says, irritated. Repeat it 20 times so that you become familiar with it. Truth is most your job. Truth is your job after all. English is so lame, isn't it? Truth is most your job. And you're right. I hesitate at the word. I'm not used to using it. Even when I type it, it ends up as either turth or truth. I have never bedded that word in a poem. I prefer the word lie. The moment the lie raises its head, I smell blood because it is there where the truth is closest. And I've thought about that passage a lot because, sometimes one has to sort of go into this thing of defining what's nonfiction, which is pretty tedious. But in that book, you move towards this definition of nonfiction as a process of reducing the amount of lies in circulation. Lies, comforting fictions, shared fictions, myths, truths that are too easy, all of those things that are that pass for truth. And I wonder, does that seem like an accurate definition or evocation of the kind of nonfiction project that you've been engaged on to reduce the amount of lies in circulation?
Up until the Truth Commission, I've only worked in poetry, which has this space of, it doesn't have full sentences, or mine, it doesn't have commas, or punctuation, it has space, white space. So the layeredness of truth, it allows for that. So you don't ever have to use the word truth or say this is the truth or this is my, because the medium allows that. So to suddenly report on the truth of what you have heard this morning, I grappled a lot with that. Yeah. And then the how it was received, our reporting. Ne? There was, a lot of Afrikaners who say, this is all lies, The women, they don't cry, they wait till the TV is on them, then they cry. And it's because of the different mediums. You have a sexy woman says, I'm standing here in front of the East London, and Mrs. So-and-so says, whatever, but she's beautifully make up and also, and then there's she on the face of Mrs. Cornelia, who is distraught, who has just spent an hour trying to formulate with. So it's also how you package, how you present the truth, or truths. that I realize is extremely important is the packaging. And that's why what you pointed out with Bongani is how he packaged a very important truthful moment.
There's one point where the audio engineer says, "Can you get us some nice audible crying?" Or something?
Yeah.
The glibness,
Yes.
and then also the opposite of glibness. That's working itself through that project.
And then after a while, someone said they can hear the anger in our voices. So when they hear our voices, they switch off the radio because they can hear our anger. And so we had to stop and take back and sort of try to find a normal voice so that you report in a normal voice and not with this pent-up whatever we had, grief and anger and guilt.
Which relates to the interpreter's chapter where, if you're a simultaneous interpreter, someone's telling an incredibly traumatic story, how do you inflect that story as you translate it a few seconds later? Do you mime or pantomime?
A few seconds, a second. I mean, the amount of brain power that is involved, because you hear something, but while you hear something, you are talking. So you hear something and you translate and you talk. So that process is never ending. And you can't apparently learn it. You can become better at it, but you cannot be taught it. So it was an incredible gift, actually, that the Truth Commission gave this country, that for the first time you could speak in your own language and people could understand you. Yes.
It's a remarkable chapter. I'd had never thought about it before, and sure, it's anyway. Thank you for it, and to your co-authors. Alex, now I want to get back to you. Could you read a piece of your work for us? What would you like to read?
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thursday, 17 May 2012. The Goodman Gallery receives a letter of demand from attorneys acting on behalf of the ruling party, the African National Congress, to take down the artwork titled The Spear, threatening a court application should they fail to do so. I'm at home with a mean dose of the flu when I open an email that is plinked into my inbox from the Goodman Gallery in Johannesburg. In bold underlined type at the top of my screen, the dispatch is headed, Goodman Gallery response to threat of censorship by South African ruling party. Oh no, here we go, I think. The threat of censorship by ruling party. The words induce an instant thunk of dread in my solar plexus. It's a bodily déjà vu triggered by distant cellular memories of late-night shifts on the student newspaper in a stuffy room above the Student Union at Rhodes University. There were tanks on the campus at the time. Cops were rounding up members of the Black student movement, literally invading student residences, hunting people down and taking them by force. Stoffel Botha was blacking out whole chunks of the Weekly Mail, where I would later work. Olivia Forsyth, a government spy, had infiltrated the student left and had apparently slept with some of the people in my midst. This was the context in which I was dotting I's and crossing T's on the final pages of the newspaper with a tube of Pritt glue and a tepid cup of Rick coffee. A thunk in the solar plexus might seem like a rabid reaction to an email, but when I hear censorship, that's what my body remembers. My paranoid political imagination is fueled by real-life memories, and that was why I didn't hesitate to get my trainers on and head downtown on 17 September last year to join thousands of other South Africans who marched on Parliament to protest the secrecy bill. The current government's amped up attempts to suppress freedom of expression are no secret to me. Still, this email comes as a shock. And this is a piece written in shards, I guess. So I'd like to read another very short shard as well. From Wednesday, the 23rd of May, The cases of vandalism against the two defacers are postponed to 28 June. FPB Chief Exec Yoliswa Makasi recuses herself from hearings on the painting. Stembiso Msomi writes a piece in the Times that shakes me up on the inside. By way of explaining the deep offense Murray's painting has caused him, he tells of how his ancestors were made to strip naked in public like cattle and walk through a tank filled with disinfectant before they were allowed to live and work in the city. Quote, even when the native happened to be born in the city, like many of my father's generation, he still had to be subjected to the dastardly deed of having his genitals exposed in public for city officials to decide if they were healthy enough to work or had to be deported to some homeland in the yonder. And this was as late as the 1970s, he writes. This is the inherited trauma that the painting has triggered in Msomi. And having grown up in Durban in the 70s and 80s, his words have a particular sting for me. As much as I might wish it, I am not on the outside of his story. It takes me back to all the wrongness of things I never saw, but sensed.
Thank you, Alex. I think that that passage shows why it's such a compelling piece, as your sort of anarchic, absolute desire for freedom of thought and expression encounters the reality of the sedimented history of humiliation, and you take it so seriously, and it's a wonderfully sort of vacillating, complicated piece. I realize that we should open up to questions. I can't really see, but I presume someone who's got a mic, a roving mic. Is there anyone? Yep, over there. Anyone who'd like to pose a question to the panel?
Yay.
I've done a bad job.
Yeah. Okay. One, two. Yeah.
Okay, this is a panel about memoir and about nonfiction. Bongani, I just want you to speak about how some of your most powerful truths that I've read, you've written as fiction. You want to talk a little bit, just say something for me to take home about how fiction and memoir work together.
Thanks, Helen. Can we take the second question as well? Just to gather thoughts. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Hello, thank you so much, everyone. I feel like I'm fangirling a bit, actually. You're all such wonderful writers. My question is to everyone, and maybe I would like to use Antjie Krog reading your Country of My Skull as an example of where this question comes from. Is that the first time I read it, about 10 years ago in my undergraduate studies, I put it down halfway through because I had I felt physically distressed. And I went back to it, and I'm so glad I did, and it's become one of my favorite books by a South African author. And there were moments too in Our Ghosts Once Were People where I felt distressed, and my question to the panel is, not sure I like the word bravery, but how do you feel brave in your body so that the words feel safe enough to put on the page?
Can I just thank you, Helen, for the kind words. And so, just so everyone is clear, I planted Helen here, so we've worked together. But on a more serious note, I'm not somebody that writes a lot, and it's only times when I felt like I've got something essential to say. And it doesn't matter what the form is. Sometimes it's somebody who's asking me to produce something in a particular form. And sometimes that marriage of, yeah, I think it's just a confluence of time, place, and circumstance. So I don't have like a real answer for you, and I hope I haven't disappointed you. Okay. You can take the. I'm leaving that one for you. So.
I think it's important, or let me start. You don't think about a readership when you write. It's not. I don't think it should be there. There is something that you find needs to be said, and if someone else is saying it, you are pleased and delighted. If it's not, you think, oh, gee, okay. But then also you have to take risks in the writing. It has to, I have a friend who says it must feel like you jump down a waterfall. You don't know whether this book is going to survive, but you have to take the risk. A safe book is a useless book in a way. When one is young, all your glands are working, and you take all kinds of risks. When you're old, this is probably the scariest year of my life. Is this book? I'm terrified of it, and I would be glad if it's December, that it can be behind me. And it's not. It's that one. That this country deserves so much more and so many more voices and experiences. And that one hopes in some ways, there was a wonderful panel earlier about how there's no structure to really use all and make use of and sell all and distribute all the many stories that are there. Yeah, so it's a real, I would say, grief in a way, because what I read here in South Africa, I don't read in any other country. It's a very unique mixture of spaces and of experiences. Yeah, and there needs to be much more, and the thing is English. That is the big problem. I mean, here's the world. This part has been written by, we even have 2 Nobel Prize winners here. So it's been thoroughly written in English, but here's a whole world happening in different languages that's not getting there. Now, what Afrikaans is doing has for the first time opened up a space for people who write in Kaaps, people who write in Oranje Rivier Afrikaans. So suddenly, an unbelievable array of incredible stories is surfacing in Afrikaans. But yeah.
I'm conscious of the time. I just want to say one thing else. Maybe it's not directly related to your question. Njabulu Ndebele has this essay from many years ago in the Mail and Guardian called On Pretense and Protest. And he was talking about pretense. And I'm somebody who throws around a lot of jokes, who also pretends a lot. And you're saying like how we understand pretense is we always think that that person is being false. But sometimes pretense might be, A, it might be a muted cry for help, or B, it might be a way of saying that I'm trying to solve something, but I haven't found a way to resolve it. And that we grapple with a lot of pretense. So having a lot of, oh, geez, I've gone in a totally different, that has got nothing to do with the question. But having some patience for pretense, because it's not always malevolent. We encounter so many texts, so many pieces of writing that sometimes they don't land. But I think even in our own conversations, but sometimes we're just still figuring things out. And when we do figure them out and we're able to say the truth word, whatever, I think, yeah, Hedley, you can bail us out.
No, but I want to say that English has become the South African, it's where we find each other. And so it's an important gift in a way. It's just that I wish there's other ways in which, or there's translation. I mean, Here, why isn't there translation of what is happening in the other languages?
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree, and I think this, the discussion here, it's two qualities that we looked for in this anthology. One was risk. Did writers take a risk? And I think each of you have taken such risks in your writing, and I'm so grateful for that. And also polyphony, the voices. I mean, Alex, I've said this to you before, the names on the contents page give no sense of how many voices are in this book. And your piece is such a fantastic example of this. You carefully curate and record and archive the debate that was going on there. I mean, you even transcribe a Facebook post by the artist Senzeni Maricela, which I think was one of the most profound responses to the Zuma presidency that I've ever read. It would have been lost on Facebook, but you've placed it in a sort of polyphonic array, which I'm immensely grateful for. Are there any final, maybe you can have one or two more? If not, I want to end with something that Antjie and I have devised, talking about translation. So, Bloods in a Rhyme also appeared simultaneously as Binne Rym van Bloed in Afrikaans. And Antjie, as I said, has been a driving force in working between languages. In fact, I think it's, there was a line that you quote from Hugo Kakanham: to be conscious of the other within is to adapt your tongue to be in relation. Beautiful. And it's because you've looked at how we should and could move between languages that you are the writer you are, and that you've got to the places you've got. So I've seen you. There's been a sort of Xhosa language poet declaiming, and you translate just a few seconds behind. You don't even let them finish a sentence. And I'm going to do the same thing with you. You're going to read in Afrikaans, and I'm going to read in English the final passage of your book, which is given over to a woman who I presume is, whose first language is Sesotho, Victoria Mclwang, who looks after your mother. And you give the final words of the book to her, and we'll read the final passage.
Ek het intussen ook al die pasiënte opgepas wat demensie gehad het.
I have also looked after patients who had dementia and who make hard demands.
Geweld kan 'n mens
Violence,
sê.
you can say.
Dis baie moeilik.
This is very, very
'n
difficult.
Vrou vra vir water en dan gooi sy daai water
A woman
in jou
asks for
gesig.
water, then throws it
En
in
sy
your
kyk jou
face
aan vol
and
haat
glares at you,
en jou klere is nat en dis
full of hatred and
nagdiens.
spite. Your clothes are wet. It is night
En jy het
duty.
nie ander klere
You don't
daar
have other clothes with you.
maar jy is opgelei om nie kwaad te raak.
But one is trained
Mens
not to
kan
get
dit nie
angry.
verhelp nie.
People can't help
Jong,
it.
maar baie keer word daai mans
Sometimes the
gevaarlik.
men get violent.
Aan die manier wat hy jou storm
In the way
kan
he
jy sien,
charges at you.
nee, hierdie ou paadjie
You can
ken
see,
van
yes,
nabys te
this little
slaan.
grandpa has used
So jy
his
kan
fists
sommer
before.
dadelik agterkom
And you
watter
immediately
oumas moes maar
know
koes
which
in hulle
grandmas
lewe.
had to duck for their
Daar
lives.
is gelukkig afkoelkamers by hierdie tuise.
Luckily, there are cooling off
waar jy
rooms at the
sulke
old age
mense kan
homes to
sit
calm
totdat hulle
people down.
bedaar het. Maar jy praat jouself 100 keer op 'n dag.
But you address yourself 100
Onthou,
times each
hulle
day.
kom uit 'n ander tyd
Remember,
uit.
they come from another era.
Nee,
No,
jy moenie
no.
ontsteld wees
You
dat
mustn't
jy
be
nie kon
upset that
sien
you couldn't
ouma is
see
naby aan
Oma
haar
was
dood
close to her
nie.
death.
Dit vat kennis.
It takes knowledge.
Jy kom agter die persoon se liggaam
Looking
onttrek.
after a person for a
Die
time
persoon
helps you
hou
pick
op
up
eet.
when the body
Eet al
starts
minder.
withdrawing.
Stel nie belang in kos
The
nie.
person eats less and less, isn't interested in
Jy
food.
het seker gesien 'n ou
You must
mens
have noticed.
eet eintlik regtig
An
baie
elderly person
gretig en
eats quite
gulsig.
keenly and greedily.
Maar as daai terugtrek
But
begin,
when the withdrawal
dan
begins,
weet jy die liggaam is besig
then you know the
om
body
afskeid
is
te neem.
busy saying farewell.
Hulle begin ook al hoe minder belangstel
They
om
also
iets
stop
anders
being
te
interested to
doen,
do
iets te
anything
hoor
else.
of te luister.
Hearing or listening to
Hulle
something,
sit net so en
they
staar.
just sit and stare like that,
Eintlik wil hulle net lê op die
or
bed.
prefer to lie in bed.
Dan kom jy ook agter aan die naels van die
One
persoon.
can also see by the
Die
nails of the
vingernaels
person.
raak blou.
The fingernails turn
Die
blue.
voete, die
The feet,
onderkant van die
the
voete
underside
raak
of
so
the feet go
swart.
black.
En dan begin jy later sien hoe die oë
And later
breek.
you see the eyes
Die oë
break.
breek eintlik nog al 'n hele ruk voor die mens
The eyes
doodgaan.
usually break a
Maar
long
die
while before
belangrikste
death.
is die asemhaling.
But the most important thing is the
Jy hoor
breathing.
dadelik die verandering
It's
in die
difficult to
asem.
explain.
Dis moeilik om te verduidelik. Dis asof die asem alles wil
You
wegdruk.
hear the change in breathing immediately.
Om
It's
pad
as
te
if the
gee
breath wants
uit
to
die
push
liggaam.
away everything away to get out
Aan
of
die
the body.
geluid hoor jy hoe klou die liggaam
From the
hier by die
sound,
keel.
you can hear how the body claws at the throat.
Bly tog my vriend.
Please stay, stay, my friend.
Maar die asem sê, los my.
But the breath says, let me go. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thanks to the panelists. And if you would like, please join us near the bookshop outside in the foyer. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was unbelievable.
Wow, thank you so much.